The sedan shouldn't have been running. That was Officer Elena Carter's first thought as she stepped out of her patrol cruiser, the cool evening air of Maple Ridge brushing against her cheeks. The silver Toyota sat at the far end of the grocery store parking lot, engine humming, headlights glowing like empty, watching eyes. But the strangest part, the part that sent a prickle up her spine, was that there was no driver inside. No movement. No silhouette, just the steady purr of an engine left alive for no reason. Linda's boots crunched on the fading gravel as she approached. At 58, she'd seen enough odd calls to know that strange almost always hid danger. A wellness check could turn into a robbery, a traffic stop could become a trap, and an empty, idling car, well, that could be anything. But today felt different. Today felt wrong. "Hey, Carter," a voice barked from behind her. "You need backup to check a parked car now, or is your eyesight finally given out?" Linda stiffened. Of course, Sergeant Blake Foster. He strutted across the lot with that same arrogant smirk he wore like a badge, bigger, louder, meaner than necessary. Ever since she joined the department later in life, after raising 2 kids and burying her husband, Blake had made a hobby of reminding her she wasn't real police. Too old, too soft, too motherly, too everything he didn't respect. She didn't turn around. "It's running with nobody inside. That's suspicious enough." Blake chuckled. "Suspicious? It's a Toyota, not a terrorist cell. You're jumpy as hell." She gritted her teeth but kept her eyes forward. "Protocol says unattended running vehicles get checked, especially out here." "Protocol," he mocked, rolling his eyes. "You love that rule book more than your cat." "I don't have a cat." "Exactly. Too busy taking notes and calling in code 7s. Linda inhaled slowly. She had no patience for his taunting tonight. The grocery store lot was nearly empty, dusk settling in with long shadows stretching over the pavement. A cold wind whipped by, carrying with it the faint smell of engine exhaust. Something about that smell bothered her. It wasn't just gasoline. There was something sweeter, metallic, unnatural. She leaned forward, shining her flashlight into the driver's window. Still no one. Not even a purse, not a coffee cup, not a jacket. Just an empty seat in the soft rumble beneath her. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I've got an unoccupied vehicle, engine running, plate number—" A sudden slam echoed behind her. Linda whipped around. Blake had kicked a loose shopping cart across the asphalt. "Look at this," he laughed, pointing. "Grandma officer about to have a heart attack over a car that someone probably ran inside from to take a piss." Linda didn't respond. She refused to fuel his nonsense. She walked around the back of the car. That's when she noticed something odd. The trunk. The latch was slightly raised, not enough to be open, but not fully shut either, like someone had tried to slam it and it hadn't caught. Her heartbeat quickened. "Blake, get over here." "Oh, now she needs me. What's wrong, Carter? The trunk giving you attitude too?" "Just come here," she snapped. He sighed exaggeratedly, but walked over. Linda gripped the edge of the trunk lid and lifted it slowly, cautiously, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness inside. For a second, her mind refused to comprehend what she was seeing. Her breath hitched, her stomach turned cold. "Oh, hell," she whispered. Blake leaned in. "What? Oh my God!" Inside the trunk was a woman, unconscious, bound and gagged, her wrists tied with nylon straps, her face bruised, a tear in her shirt revealing a deep cut on her shoulder. Her chest rose and fell faintly. Alive, but barely. Linda's training kicked in. She grabbed her radio and barked, "Dispatch, I need EMS and units on scene immediately. We have a possible kidnapping victim. Repeat, kidnapping victim. Unconscious but breathing." Blake's earlier smugness evaporated. His mouth hung open, eyes wide in shock. Linda leaned forward, 2 fingers checking the woman's pulse. Weak. Fading. Whoever did this had left the engine running on purpose to keep the trunk warm enough that she didn't freeze, but hidden long enough that she might not survive. It wasn't random. It wasn't careless. It was intentional. Who would leave her here like this? Blake muttered, his voice trembling for the first time. Linda looked at the woman's torn clothes, the bruises around her wrists, the faint traces of dirt on her shoes. Then her gaze shifted to something crumpled in the corner of the trunk, a small polka-dotted children's sock. Not hers. Linda's voice dropped to a whisper. This wasn't the only victim. And just like that, everything changed. Blake swallowed hard. What do you mean? Linda stared at the sock in her hand. It was tiny, pink, fresh mud on the heel. There's a child, Linda said, her voice breaking through the cold night like a blade, and whoever took them isn't far. As the sirens wailed in the distance, Blake finally understood what she had sensed from the start. This wasn't just an abandoned car. This was the opening chapter of a nightmare, and Elena Carter had just stepped right into the middle of it.
The parking lot exploded with flashing red and blue lights as emergency vehicles screeched to a halt across the cracked asphalt. Paramedics sprinted toward the idling Toyota, pushing a stretcher between them. Officer Elena Carter stepped back just enough to give them space, but not far enough to break her line of sight. She wasn't letting this victim out of her awareness for even a second. The bound woman lay half-curled in the trunk, trembling weakly now as the cold air hit her skin. Her eyelids fluttered like she was drifting between worlds. The paramedics began cutting the nylon straps from her wrists, one of them muttering under his breath at the severity of the bruising. Blake hovered awkwardly behind Linda, no longer sarcastic or loud. He seemed almost afraid of the stillness inside the trunk. "She's been like this for hours," Linda whispered. "Maybe longer." One paramedic, a young guy named Tomas, glanced up. "Her vitals are unstable. We need her in the ambulance now." "Wait," Linda said, leaning closer. "She might be able to talk." "Ma'am," Tomas protested, "she needs immediate—" The woman's fingers twitched. Her head rolled slightly. Her lips parted. "Hold on," Linda murmured, voice soft as fabric. "Miss, can you hear me?" The woman's breathing hitched. A faint, agonized whimper escaped her throat. She tried to lift her head but collapsed back onto the trunk lining. Linda crouched lower. "Don't move. You're safe now. I'm Officer Carter. We're here to help you." The woman swallowed, her throat dry and raw. Don't watch," Linda leaned in. "You have to help us. There's someone else, a child. Where is the child?" For a moment, the woman didn't answer. Her eyes rolled back, then forward again, like she was fighting the weight of darkness pressing against her consciousness. Then her cracked voice rasped out a single, chilling word. "Run." Linda went still. Run? Why? From who? Who did this? The woman's fingers curled around Linda's uniform sleeve, surprisingly strong for someone so weak. She pulled her close, her breath warm and shaking against Linda's cheek. "He's coming back." The words landed like ice water. Before Linda could speak again, the woman's body loosened, consciousness slipping away. Tomas quickly lifted her with the help of his partner, sliding her onto the stretcher. They moved fast, shouting vitals and instructions as they wheeled her toward the ambulance. Blake exhaled shakily. So what the hell does that mean? He's coming back. Coming back where? Here? Linda didn't answer immediately. She stared at the trunk. That little pink sock still lay there, a silent accusation. She reached for it and held it up, letting the blinking lights illuminate the muddy heel and tiny embroidered heart. "Someone unloaded her," Linda said quietly, "but not the kid." "How do you know that?" "Because people don't abduct two victims, unload one, and leave the other behind." She walked to the passenger side of the Toyota, scanning the ground. "He removed her for a reason, and whatever that reason is, he didn't want her dead. Not yet." "That doesn't make sense. Why leave the car running? Why leave her alive? Why risk someone finding her?" Linda stopped walking, and her gaze hardened. "Because he wanted us to." Blake blinked. "What?" "He didn't run. He didn't take the time to hide the car. He didn't wipe prints. He didn't even finish closing the trunk. You're pointing at the slightly bent latch. Someone Staged this. Sloppy, but intentional. You're saying this was a message? Linda didn't answer because she didn't have to. The silence said enough. Across the parking lot, 2 detectives ducked under the crime scene tape, stepping briskly toward them. Detective Marla Simons, tall and severe with silver-threaded hair pulled into a slick bun, approached first. Her partner, Detective James Rowland, younger and calmer, followed. Simons didn't waste time. Walk me through it. Linda recounted everything, finding the car, the trunk, the victim's brief words. Simons listened with a tight jaw and steely focus. When Linda showed her the tiny sock, Simons' expression didn't change, but her breath did. A subtle inhale, sharp and controlled. A child, Simons murmured. That explains the sweet smell by the exhaust. Linda nodded grimly. He left the car running to keep her alive, but he didn't want the kid in the trunk with the fumes. That's why the second victim isn't here. Rowland glanced around the parking lot. Cameras. Not enough, Blake muttered, and the only ones near the back lot are always glitching. Simon shot him a look. Always? Blake swallowed. The grocery store's system has been down for weeks, budget issues. Great, she said dryly. Linda continued scanning the asphalt, her instincts whispering that the answer was here, somewhere. The woman was dumped quickly. That meant the suspect wasn't comfortable staying long. Or he didn't care because he knew he wouldn't be caught. Where's the store manager? Simons asked. Inside, Blake said. He's shaken up. Bring him out. As he jogged off, Rowland approached Linda. You picked up the details fast. Good eye. She shrugged. I raised kids. I know what a toddler's sock looks like. Rowland cracked a faint smile. Instincts like that save lives. Linda appreciated the compliment, but she didn't feel pride, only dread, because there was a more disturbing possibility blooming in her mind. What if the woman wasn't just a kidnapping victim? What if she was a mother? What if the child was hers? Before she could voice the thought, Blake returned with the store manager, a pale, balding man with trembling hands. I didn't see anything. Nobody suspicious, nobody running, I swear. Did you notice the car earlier? Simons asked. He nodded vigorously. It was parked there at least an hour before you arrived. Linda stiffened. An hour? Running? Yes, I thought someone left it on by accident. You know how people get rushed. No, nobody forgets a running car for an hour. Did you see anyone near it? Simons pressed. The manager swallowed hard. Just one man. Simons leaned closer. Describe him. He had a hat, sunglasses. I thought he was waiting for someone, but he was off. How so? Linda asked. The manager hesitated. He kept looking at the doors, like he was nervous, and then he opened the trunk. Linda's breath stopped. What time? Simons demanded. Maybe 4:30? Linda whipped her head toward the nearest squad car clock. It was 5:12 p.m. The suspect had been here 40 minutes ago. Why didn't you call the police? Blake blurted. The manager crumpled. I didn't know. I thought it was his car. Linda's heart pounded. Which way did he go? The manager pointed toward the edge of the lot, where a dark tree line bordered an old service road. He walked that way, like he was waiting for someone to pick him up, or like he had somewhere else to be. Simon snapped her fingers. Get units sweeping that road, drone support, canines. Linda felt her throat tighten. If he took the child, if he was on foot, he couldn't have gotten far. And if the woman's warning was true, he might be coming back. Linda stared into the shadows beyond the lot. Something moved there, or maybe it was only her fear whispering. Rowland's voice echoed faintly behind her. We need everyone focused. The child could still be alive. Linda nodded, jaw clenched. Not could. Would. She wasn't letting another life slip through her fingers. Not tonight. Not ever.
The ambulance pulled away with a shriek of tires, leaving a hollow stillness in the parking lot. The crime scene lights flickered over the cracked asphalt, casting long, eerie shadows that stretched toward the tree line, where the suspect had vanished less than an hour earlier. Officer Linda Carter stepped back from the flashing lights and took a slow, steadying breath. She'd been on the force for 22 years, long enough to know when something wasn't just a crime. This was a message, a twisted one. Detective Simons approached her, arms crossed tightly. "Carter, I need you with me for the interview at the hospital. The victim may wake up sooner than we expected." Linda nodded. "I'm coming, but we need to send patrols farther west. If he took the kid toward the service road, that leads to the old industrial zone." Simons frowned. "You know that area well?" "I used to, before they shut most of it down." "Then say so in the briefing," Simons said sharply, but not unkindly. "The more intel we have, the better." As they headed toward the squad car, the wind shifted, cold and sharp, and Linda felt something bite at the back of her neck, a strange tension, a pressure, like someone was watching. She turned. Nothing. Just the empty spaces between lampposts and the slow spin of abandoned shopping carts in the breeze. Still, her gut twisted. Not good. 20 minutes later, Linda and Simons walked into St. Stephen's Hospital. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Nurses hurried between patient rooms. The entire place smelled of antiseptic and old tile. The victim had been rushed to a private room in the trauma unit. A doctor in jade green scrubs met them outside the door. "She's extremely dehydrated, severe bruising on the wrists and ankles, a concussion. She's lucky to be alive." "Do you know how long she was restrained?" Simons asked. "Hard to say precisely, maybe 12 hours, maybe more." Linda swallowed. "What about her mental state?" she asked. The doctor hesitated. "She's scared, terrified. She wakes up choking on her own breath. The moment she saw the paramedics, she tried to fight free until she realized she was safe." Simons nodded. "We need to talk to her." "You can," the doctor said, lowering his voice, "but not for long. She's fragile. Be careful." Linda pushed open the door. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp on the bedside table. Machines beeped softly in steady rhythms. The woman lay under a thin blanket, hooked to an IV, her face pale, her lips cracked. Her wrists were wrapped in white gauze, dotted with bruises like ink under her skin. When she heard the footsteps, her eyes opened, and panic flashed. Linda lifted both palms gently. "It's okay. You're safe. You're in a hospital." The woman's breathing spiked. Is he here?" "No," Linda said firmly. "You're protected. No one is going to hurt you." Her eyes darted around. The little one." Linda stepped closer. "Is the child yours?" The woman nodded instantly, tears pooling. "What's the child's name?" Simons asked. "Aurora. She's 3. Linda felt a cold wave rush through her. "Your daughter wasn't with you when we found you, but we're searching." The woman's shaking intensified. "Please, please find her. He took her. He said I'd never see her unless I did what he wanted." "What did he want?" Simons pressed. The woman shut her eyes, whispering something too quiet to hear. Linda knelt beside the bed. "I know you're scared. Anyone would be. But we can't save your daughter unless you help us understand." Silence. Then the woman opened her eyes again, slowly, painfully, and whispered, "He made me drive the car." Simons stiffened. "The Toyota?" She nodded again. "He told me to keep the engine running. Then he put me in the trunk." Linda frowned deeply. "Why? Why leave you alive?" "He said I was insurance." "Insurance for what?" Simons pressed. "For the package," the woman murmured, voice cracking. "He kept saying, 'If something happens to the package, you pay the price.' He used those words over and over." Linda exchanged a look with Simons. "This package," Linda said gently, "what did he mean? Drugs? Money?" The woman shook her head violently. "Not money, not anything like that." "Then what was he carrying?" The woman shivered. "Not carrying." She slowly turned her head toward Linda. "Hiding." A chill rolled through the room. Simons asked softly, "Hiding where?"
"In the car," the woman whispered. "Under the back seat." Linda's heart dropped. "Are you saying there was something under the car that we didn't find?" The woman's face tensed with grief and fear all at once. Not something. Someone. Linda froze. Simons went pale. "What do you mean, someone?" The woman's lips trembled as she formed the words. "A baby." Linda blinked softly. "A newborn?" The woman said, tears running down her cheeks. "A newborn. I put a newborn under the back seat before he shoved me in the trunk." Simons grabbed her notebook. "How old? How long had the baby been there?" "I don't know," the woman sobbed. "Hours? Maybe the whole night? He told me to ignore it, said it wasn't my problem." Linda pressed her mouth to her hand. "No one heard anything," she whispered. "We searched the car, but—" The woman shook her head. "He cut a hole under the seat, a hidden space. He covered it with insulation, soundproof." Linda felt her knees weaken. A hidden compartment, a trapped newborn, unheard, unseen. "Why would he do this?" Simons asked, voice sharp. The woman looked straight at her. "Because he's not done." Simons stood still. "He needed me alive," the woman continued, "because he's meeting someone tonight at midnight to deliver the baby and the proof that I did everything he told me to." Linda felt a tremor run through her chest. "What proof?" The woman looked down at her bandaged wrists. "These." Linda gasped softly. "He recorded me," the woman whispered, "saying I was the one who took Aurora, that I kidnapped my own daughter, that I was unfit." Simon's jaw tightened. "Why frame you?" The woman's voice cracked like thin glass. "Because he wants her." Linda blinked. "Your daughter?" "No," the woman whispered. "Not Aurora." She lifted trembling eyes to Linda. "He wants the newborn." Silence washed over the room like a tidal wave. Then the woman leaned forward, voice trembling. "And that baby is not his." Simon stepped back. "Then whose is it?" The woman closed her eyes. "My sister's." Linda's heartbeat thudded in her ears. "Your sister is missing?" The woman nodded faintly. "For 4 months." "And the father?" Simon's voice was barely above a whisper. The woman hesitated. Then she said, "He's a police officer." Linda went completely still. Simon's expression hardened, but there was fear behind it. The woman took a shaky breath. "Not just any police officer." Her eyes locked onto Linda's. "Officer Blake Hollins." Linda's blood froze. Not Blake? Not the young officer she had mentored? Not the kid she had stood for, defended, believed in? But the woman wasn't finished. "There's one more thing," she whispered, cheeks wet and trembling. "The reason he took Aurora and my sister's baby." Linda braced herself. The woman sobbed the words. "They said they're the same bloodline." Linda's heart stopped. Blake's bloodline. Simons grabbed the edge of the bed. "Are you telling us?" The woman nodded, broken. "He's the father of both." Linda staggered backward. Reality cracked open, and the truth spilled out like poison. Blake wasn't just connected. Blake wasn't just involved. Blake was the monster they were hunting. And he was still out there, with a newborn and a 3-year-old, waiting for midnight, waiting for the exchange, waiting. The walk back to the precinct felt colder than the hospital room, colder than the parking lot, colder than the night outside. Officer Elena Carter felt every step like a weight sinking into cement. The woman's words looped in her mind, twisting like hooked wire. "He's one of yours, Officer Blake Hollins, the father of both children." Every time the memory replayed, Linda's jaw tightened. Blake, her trainee, her rookie, her responsibility. She had vouched for him, she had defended him, she had believed him when others warned he was off. Now she wished she had listened. Detective Simons pushed open the precinct door, letting the cold, fluorescent light spill into the night behind them.
Inside, phones rang, officers typed, radios crackled. Everything looked normal. Too normal, considering a predator in uniform was still out there with 2 children in danger. Simons motioned Linda into the briefing room. "We need to keep this quiet for now," he said, shutting the door behind them. "If Blake catches wind we're onto him, those kids don't stand a chance." "I know," Linda said. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook under the table. Simons dropped files onto the desk. "We're going to need to question him without alerting him why. This has to be surgical." Linda stared at the blank wall for a moment before whispering, "He trusted me. If anyone can get him talking, it's me." Simons studied her with a sharp, assessing gaze. "Are you sure you're the right one for this? You look shaken." "I am shaken," Linda admitted, "but that doesn't matter. What matters is getting to him before midnight." Simons nodded. "Good, then let's bring him in discreetly." But before they could move, the door opened, and Officer Blake Hollins stepped inside. Linda's breath caught. He was in uniform, calm, expression unreadable, the kind of calm people practice in mirrors before they lie. "Detective," Blake said casually, "Sarge told me you needed to see me." Linda forced herself to swallow. "Close the door, Blake." He did, and for a moment, all 3 of them stood there in a heavy silence. Simons leaned back in his chair. "We just have a few questions about a vehicle found abandoned at the strip mall off Route 19. Blake's eyes flicked to Linda, searching her face. She kept her expression stone-cold still. "What kind of vehicle?" "A gray Toyota Camry." Simons flipped a page in the folder, though he wasn't actually reading anything. "You know anyone who drives one?" Blake shrugged. "Half the city drives one. Why?" "We found something interesting in the trunk." For the first time, a hint of emotion flickered across Blake's face, so quick most wouldn't notice. But Linda did. Guilt. Fear. Recognition. A mixture that sent chills down her spine. "What exactly did you find?" Blake asked, voice slightly strained. Linda stepped forward. "A woman," she said quietly. "Bound. Bruised. Locking her in like that could have killed her." Blake's jaw twitched, just barely, but it did. He knew. He knew they'd found her. He knew she survived, and he knew his plan was unraveling. "What woman?" Blake asked, trying to sound confused, but his hands betrayed him, subtle tremors in his fingers, the twitch of a vein in his wrist, the shift of weight from one foot to the other. Simons watched him closely. "A mother reporting her daughter missing. Recognize her?" "No," Blake answered too fast. Linda took another step toward him, lowering her voice. "Her name is Ami Delgado." Blake's face went stiff, so stiff it was almost a flinch. "You sure you don't know her?" Linda pressed. "I already said I don't." "You don't know her sister either?" she asked. His pupils tightened. "We talked to her," Linda said softly. "She's awake." That got him. Blake's breath hitched. "What did she say?" he asked. Simons answered. "Enough." Blake swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing visibly. Linda could feel the tension vibrating in the room, Blake's nerves coiling tighter, his eyes flicking toward the door, calculating something. Escape routes, timing, distance. She stepped between him and the exit without him even noticing her movement. "We're not arresting you," Simons lied smoothly. "We're trying to understand what happened. Help us understand." Blake looked from Simons to Linda. Then he smiled, a slow, deliberate, razor-thin smile that chilled Linda's blood. "Funny," Blake murmured, "because it sounds like you think I'm guilty of something." Simons kept his tone cool. "Should we?" Blake didn't answer, but Linda could see the shift. The facade peeled away, the good officer mask cracked, and underneath something dark stared back. "I tried to help her, you know," Blake said suddenly. Simons and Linda exchanged a glance. "She was a mess, her sister even worse. I stepped in because no one else cared." His voice twisted, not angry but righteous, like a man who had convinced himself his sins were noble. Linda's chest tightened. "Blake, where are the children?" He held her eyes for a long moment. Then he whispered, "Safe." "Safe where?" she demanded. He ignored the question.
"You mentored me," he said quietly. "You taught me to read people, how to stay one step ahead." Simon stiffened. "Don't—" Blake cut him off. "And you really think I wouldn't know when someone's lying?" Linda blinked once. Then it hit her like ice water. He knew. He had known from the moment he walked in. "You talk to her. You know too much." And suddenly, he wasn't smiling anymore. He lunged. Fast. Too fast. He shoved the table hard, flipping it into Simon's. The detective fell backward with a yell, crashing into a cabinet. Papers flew everywhere. Before Linda could draw her weapon, Blake slammed his shoulder into her, sending her stumbling. But she didn't fall. She grabbed his arm. He twisted out of her hold, but she stayed with him, swinging her weight to force him off balance. Blake hissed and shoved her again, this time harder. Linda slammed against the wall. Pain shot for her ribs, but she pushed off the wall and sprinted after him. "Blake, stop!" But he was already through the hallway door. Chaos erupted. Officers stood as he barreled through the precinct, knocking over a chair, slipping past a stunned sergeant and grabbing the first shortcut he could, through the side hall, past the evidence room. Linda sprinted after him, Simons limping at her heels. "Lock the doors!" she screamed. "Stop him! Do not let him leave the building!" Officers scrambled, but Blake was desperate, and desperation made him fast. He crashed through a side exit, slamming into the alley behind the precinct, where a police cruiser was parked. Linda saw it before anyone else. "No, no, don't you dare!" Blake yanked open the cruiser door, dove inside, and hit the ignition. The engine roared. Linda ran towards him, gun drawn but aimed at the tires, not him. "Blake, get out of the car!" He locked eyes with her through the windshield. Something cold, something final. Then he stomped on the gas. The cruiser shot forward with a screech, nearly clipping her as it raced down the dark alley and vanished into the night. Simons limped upside her, breathless. "Carter, he's gone." Linda lowered her gun slowly. "No," she said, voice trembling with fury and dread. "He's not gone." Her breath shuddered. "He's going to them, to Aurora, to the newborn, to the exchange, at midnight." And now Blake knew they were coming, which meant the confrontation wasn't over. It had only begun.
The hours after Blake's escape were some of the worst in the precinct's history. Phones rang non-stop, patrol cars scrambled across the county, notifications from regional agencies lit up every screen, alerts, pings, potential sightings. But no Blake, no kids, no leads, just a deepening sense of dread. Officer Linda Carter sat at her desk, elbows on her knees, hands in her hair. Every muscle in her body throbbed from the earlier collision, but she barely felt it. Her mind replayed the moment Blake looked right at her through the cruiser windshield, eyes hollow, like something human had drained out and left nothing behind. Detective Simons slammed a stack of papers onto her desk. "We got nothing," he growled. "Not a damn sighting. Did you know he killed the dash cam on that cruiser, cut the feed before he even turned the corner?" Linda didn't look up. "He's trained. He knows how we track. He knows the blind spots." "That's the problem." Simons kicked a chair. It spun across the floor. "He's using everything we taught him." Linda finally lifted her head. Her face looked like carved stone, hard, controlled, but cracking underneath. The woman in the trunk. Her sister, her kids. He's going to finish what he started. Simon stared at her a long moment, then nodded grimly. "We need a location, something he'd think we wouldn't suspect." Linda closed her eyes and pressed her fingertips to her temples. Blake always had a pattern. He hit it well, but he couldn't stop himself. A pattern? He talked about quiet places. Her voice trailed off as memories piece by piece assembled into something darker. Blake during training. People underestimate silence. It's the perfect cover. Blake months later. There are places no one checks, places forgotten. Simons leaned closer. Carter, focus. Where would he go? He mentioned abandoned property outside the service area, old municipal buildings, small decommissioned spaces. She rubbed her forehead, digging deeper. Storage, back rooms, utility tunnels, anywhere no one goes after dark. Simons groaned. There are hundreds of places like that. But only one he talked about. Linda stood abruptly. The old reservoir. Simons blinked. You mean the one condemned in '98? It's barely standing. Linda nodded. Exactly. Blake said the county never bothered demolishing it because it was too expensive. He joked you could probably hide a whole family down there and no one would know for decades. For God's sake, Simons grabbed his jacket. We're rolling out. As they headed for the exit, Captain Ruiz intercepted them. Captain, Simons, my office, now. Simons opened his mouth to object, but the captain's glare warned against it. Inside her office, she shut the door and folded her arms. Explain to me how in hell one of my officers, one of your trainees, Carter, just walked out with a stolen cruiser and we didn't stop him. Linda held her ground. Because he planned it, because he used his training against us, because you protected him. The accusation hit harder than any shove Blake had delivered. He was your rookie, your responsibility. You signed off on his evals. You insisted he showed promise. Linda felt her throat tighten. And I was wrong. Being wrong isn't the problem. Not seeing the signs, that's the problem. Simons cut in. Captain, with all due respect, this isn't the time. It is exactly the time. Ruiz slammed a file on the desk. He used department resources, access, vehicles, hell, maybe even intel from ongoing cases. If this goes public before we contain it, we're all done. Linda clenched her fists. We're wasting time. Children could be dying while we stand here pointing fingers. Ruiz's expression softened, just slightly. Then she sighed, rubbing her forehead. You're right, but understand. Internal affairs is already crawling up my spine. The mayor is demanding updates every 10 minutes. And the media? God, the media. She turned to Linda. They want to paint him as a rogue officer, a monster in blue, and they want someone to blame for not catching him sooner. Linda swallowed hard. Let them blame me later, after we save the kids. Ruiz nodded, then gestured toward the door. Fine, go. But Carter, if you find him, do not engage alone. Do you understand me? Linda didn't answer. The captain's voice sharpened. I said, do you understand? Linda met her gaze. I'll stop him, however I have to. Ruiz exhaled sharply. Dismissed. In the cruiser, Simons keyed up the radio. All units, be advised. New potential location tied to suspect Hollins. Prepare for coordinated approach. Linda stared out the window, heart pounding. Simons glanced at her. You okay? No. He nodded. Good. If you said you were, I'd be worried. She let out a short, humorless breath. Blake fooled me. I saw what I wanted to see, a kid who needed structure, guidance, someone to believe in him. Simons tightened his jaw. Predators are good at looking helpless. That's how they survive. He talked about his childhood, how he was bullied, how no one ever stood up for him, how he just wanted to be the hero he never had. Maybe he even believed that, but somewhere along the way, something twisted, and he decided he deserved things he had no right taking. Linda nodded slowly. He thought he had a right to that woman, to her sister, to those kids. Most dangerous criminals aren't the ones who think they're villains. They're the ones who think they're justified. Linda swallowed hard. We trained him to be better. Instead, he used it to be worse. The cruiser pulled onto the old service road, gravel crunching beneath the tires. Ahead, the flashing lights of 3 other patrol cars illuminated the cracked concrete path leading toward the abandoned reservoir. Officers were gathering near the broken perimeter fence. We go slow. If he's here, he'll hear us coming. Linda unbuckled her seatbelt. No, she said softly. He'll hear me coming. Simons frowned. Carter. I'm the one he knows best. I'm the one he expects.
And that might be the only advantage we have. Simons cursed under his breath, but didn't stop her. Together, they approached the crumbling structure, the old reservoir's main building, now a husk of rotting wood, rusted metal, and shadow-filled entryways. The wind whistled across the dry basin below. A place forgotten. A place Blake would think no one remembered. Linda's stomach hardened into a knot. If she was right, the children were somewhere inside. A cry echoed faintly in the wind. Simon stiffened. Was that? Linda didn't wait. She ran, straight into the darkness of the building, straight into whatever waited inside, straight toward the fallout of every mistake she had ever made.
Linda burst into the reservoir's dark entryway, her pulse hammering in her ears. The air inside was cold, stale, and heavy with a damp metallic scent. The dim glow from her flashlight cut a narrow beam through the dust-filled darkness. The structure groaned under its own age, echoing faintly like a warning. "Carter, wait!" Simons yelled from behind her, but she didn't slow. Every instinct in her screamed that the children were close, too close. "Police!" Linda shouted, her voice bouncing off the concrete walls. "If anyone can hear me, call out!" Only silence answered. She swept her flashlight over the interior. Broken pipes, collapsed beams, old reservoir tanks rusted red. Everything looked abandoned, forgotten, except for the faint footprint in the dust. Fresh, deep. Someone had been here recently. Simons reached her, breath tight. "We should secure the perimeter before we charge into blind hallways." "He's moving," Linda snapped. "We don't have time to—" A soft thump echoed from deeper inside. Simon stiffened. "You hear that?" Linda nodded, her grip tightening around her gun. Another thump, then a scrape, then a muffled cry. A child's cry. Linda's heart lurched. "This way!" She sprinted toward the sound, weaving through narrow corridors and climbing over debris. Simons followed, muttering curses under his breath. Kidnapping, assault, attempted murder. He's racking up a lifetime's worth of charges, and he's got nothing to lose. You need to remember that. "I know what he is," Linda said. "No," Simons replied firmly. "You know who he was. That's the problem." Linda didn't answer, but the words hit hard. Because deep down, some part of her still saw the rookie she had tried to mentor, the eager young officer who'd hung on to every lesson, every instruction. The one who'd once said, "I just want to make a difference, Carter." But that boy was gone. A shadow moved across the far wall. Simons froze. "Contact rear! Movement!" They leveled their guns, beams of light slicing through the gloom. "Blake!" Linda shouted. "We know you're here." Nothing. Just the slow drip of water somewhere deep in the old reservoir. Then Blake's voice floated through the darkness. Calm, cold, controlled. "You shouldn't have come alone, Carter." Her blood chilled. "Release the children, Blake. This ends now." A soft chuckle echoed around them. It was impossible to pinpoint his location. "You're not here to save them. You're here to redeem yourself." "Shut up," Simon snarled. "Show yourself." Blake ignored him. "You were the only one who ever believed in me, the only one who saw something worth shaping. And now look at you, charging in blind, risking everything, just to undo your mistake." Linda forced herself to breathe evenly. "Let them go, Blake. This isn't you." "Yes, it is," Blake said quietly. "This is who I've always been. You just didn't want to see it." A faint shuffle echoed from the right. Simons pivoted that way. "He's circling us." Then a sudden metallic clang sounded behind them. Then a scream, a child's scream. Linda sprinted toward the noise, shoving past a hanging sheet of rusted metal into a narrow side chamber. The beam of her flashlight cut across two terrified children, maybe 5 and 8, huddled together, hands bound, faces streaked with tears. "Oh, God," Linda dropped to her knees. "It's okay. You're safe. I've got you." She worked quickly to free their wrists, her hands trembling.
Simons covered the entrance, gun raised. He's playing with us, you know that. I don't care. They come first. As soon as the bindings fell, the kids clung to her, sobbing. Linda felt her heart twist. "We're gonna get you out of here," Linda whispered. But just as she stood to lift the younger child, a loud crack boomed through the building, the sharp whine of metal stressed to the breaking point. Simon spun toward the sound. "What the—" Another crack. Then the ceiling above them shuddered. Simon swore. "He rigged the place. He wants it to collapse." Linda's breath caught. Blake had anticipated they'd find the kids. He'd turned the building into a trap. "Move!" Linda yelled. Simons grabbed the older child, while Linda hoisted the younger one into her arms. They sprinted down the passage, just as a section of ceiling collapsed behind them, sending dust and debris flying. Cough. "He knew we'd come here. He wanted all of us here." Linda's voice was sharp. "He wants a confrontation." "Oh, he's gonna get one," Simons muttered. They reached the exterior hallway leading to the cracked open exit. Fresh air filtered through the gap. Officers outside were shouting commands, forming a perimeter. "We're at the east entrance," Simons yelled into his radio. "We have the children." But before they reached the door, the building's old steel doors slammed shut with a thunderous clang. Simons nearly dropped the child. "He locked us in?" Linda turned to the entrance. Locked, jammed, maybe even welded. Blake's voice echoed faintly over the cavernous interior. "You're not leaving until we finish this, Carter." Simons growled. "Come out and fight like a man, you coward." Silence. Then footsteps, slow, calm, deliberate, growing closer. Simons backed the children into the corner, shielding them. "We need backup breaching from the outside, now." Linda's radio crackled. Static. Then Ruiz's voice. "Carter, Carter, come in. Are you inside with him?" "Yes," Linda said. "He sealed the exits." "Stand by. Emergency response is breaching from the north wall. Hold position." The footsteps stopped. Linda stepped forward, gun trembling slightly in her hand. "Blake, it's over." "No, Carter," his voice was closer than she expected. "It's finally beginning." A pipe burst overhead, spraying a stream of cold water down the corridor. Simons hissed. "He's stalling. He wants to destabilize the foundation." The building groaned again, long, deep, like a dying creature. Linda's pulse spiked. He wasn't stalling. He was accelerating the collapse. The kids whimpered behind Simons. "Blake," Carter called softly, "you once told me that every officer faces a moment where they decide who they are. This is mine." "This is murder," she shot back. "No," Blake whispered. "This is cleansing." Then the lights inside the reservoir flickered once and died. Absolute darkness swallowed everything. The children screamed. Simons cursed loudly. Linda forced her breathing to steady. "Stay calm. Stay close to the wall." Footsteps echoed again, but now they were running toward them. Linda raised her gun, trying to pinpoint the sound. "Flashlight! Linda, move!" A shadow lunged out of the dark. Linda pivoted just in time, but the figure wasn't Blake. It was one of the support beams collapsing. The beam crashed to the ground inches from where she had stood, splitting the floor open. Water surged upward through the crack. The reservoir had started to flood. Simons grabbed her shoulder. "We need to move, now!" Linda hoisted the younger child again and sprinted toward the side tunnel, the one that she had memorized on her way in, the only path that hadn't yet collapsed. Behind them, Blake's voice cut through the darkness one last time. "You can't save them all." Linda didn't look back. "We're gonna get out of here," she whispered to the little girl clinging to her neck. "All of us." But even she wasn't entirely sure. All she knew was one thing. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. This was a war. And Blake had already chosen his battlefield.
Water gushed faster now, pooling around Linda's boots, swirling with rust and debris. The children clung to her and Simons, their small bodies trembling violently. The roar of collapsing beams echoed through the reservoir like distant thunder. Go, go, go! Simons barked, his voice straining above the chaos. They sprinted down the narrow side passage, Linda's flashlight bobbing wildly in the darkness as she ran. The girl in her arms sobbed into her shoulder, while the older boy stumbled behind Simons, trying to keep up. Behind them, the entire ceiling of the main chamber groaned, then dropped. The sound was horrifying. A monstrous bone-deep rumble followed by an explosion of dust and water rushing toward them like a wave. The ground shook beneath their feet. Simons shoved the boy forward. "Move faster!" Linda whipped her head back for a split second and saw it, a tidal surge of murky water chasing them with terrifying speed. "Simons, run!" They bolted. The corridor ahead twisted, the floor slick with moss and leaking water. Linda's breath burned in her chest, her boots splashing heavily with every step. The girl's cries grew quieter. She was running out of energy, her tiny arms limp around Linda's neck. "No, no, sweetheart, stay awake," Linda urged, lifting the child higher. "We're getting out, I promise." The reservoir wasn't meant to hold weight or pressure anymore, not for decades. The more it collapsed, the more water it funneled into the lower chambers. It was becoming a tomb. They couldn't afford to slow down. Simons looked over his shoulder, pale. "It's catching up!" Linda didn't need to look. She could hear it, water smashing against concrete, devouring everything in its path. Blake had triggered the system perfectly. He wasn't just trying to trap them. He wanted the collapse itself to finish the job. "Left!" Linda shouted, pointing her flashlight at the fork ahead. Simon skidded around the corner first, gripping the older boy's hand so hard the child yelped. "Keep up! Keep up!" The metal door to the emergency access route was just visible at the end of the hallway, half buried under fallen wires and fractured cement, bent but not sealed. If they could reach it, they had a chance. A loud metallic clank echoed through the tunnel. Linda froze. Footsteps. Heavy ones. And then a silhouette appeared in the distance, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with deliberate calm. Blake. He stepped into the faint beam of her flashlight. Dust coated his hair, the side of his face streaked with grime. But his eyes were dark, steady, and frighteningly clear. He wasn't running to escape the collapse. He was coming straight for them. "For God's sakes," Simons whispered. "He's insane." Blake's voice carried eerily across the hallway. "You shouldn't have stolen them from me, Carter." Linda steadied her breathing. "They're children. You never had them." Blake smiled, a small, cold curl of the lips. "You took everything I built." "You didn't build anything. You destroyed it." Simons raised his gun. "Carter, tell me I can shoot him." "No," Linda snapped. "He wants a firefight. He wants crossfire near the kids." Blake stepped closer, boots splashing in the water. "You were supposed to teach me, to shape me, but all you taught me was fear." Linda tightened her jaw. "I taught you how to protect people. You chose not to listen." "I chose freedom, and freedom is dangerous. You, of all people, should have understood that." Another crack sounded overhead. A chunk of ceiling broke loose and plunged into the water beside Linda, sending a wave across her legs. She nearly lost her balance, but steadied herself, shielding the child. There was no time for speeches anymore. "Simons," she shouted, "take the kids to the exit." Simons gasped at her. "What? No, Carter, don't you do this!" Linda didn't give him a choice. "Move!" Her voice ricocheted through the corridor, sharp and commanding, the authoritative tone Simons knew well, the one he'd trained under. Simons swallowed hard, eyes flicking between Blake and the children. "I'll see you at the door," he muttered, and bolted, dragging the kids with him. Linda stepped forward, gun raised, blocking Blake's path. Blake smiled wider. "You were always a fighter." "I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to stop you." "You can't stop what's already set in motion." He tilted his head. "This place was my plan, my test, and you walked right into it." "You're not walking out of here," Linda hissed. Blake lunged. Linda fired. The bullet hit the concrete beside him as Blake shoved her arm aside faster than she expected. His shoulder slammed into her, sending her crashing into the wall. Pain shot up her arm. She kicked out, catching his shin. He stumbled, but he was strong, stronger than she remembered.
He swung a pipe he'd been hiding behind his back. Linda ducked, the metal narrowly missing her head. Sparks flew as it struck concrete behind her. She rammed her elbow into his ribs. He grunted but didn't fall. "You taught me that move," he growled, "and I'm not done teaching." She swung the flashlight into his jaw, hard. Blake's head snapped sideways. He staggered, dropping the pipe with a metallic clatter. Linda lunged for the weapon, but Blake recovered quicker, grabbing her by the vest and hurling her into the opposite wall. Her back exploded with pain. He reached for his belt, pulling out a sharp, jagged utility blade, the kind used to cut through metal wire. Blake's voice went low, almost a whisper. "You were the mother I never had, Carter, and the judge I didn't want." "You need help," she gasped. "I need you gone." He charged, but a deafening explosion cut through the hallway, the north wall finally breaching under the pressure of rescue crews outside. The shockwave knocked both of them off their feet. Blake hit the water first, sliding backwards. Linda scrambled up, lungs burning, and bolted toward the exit where she could see flashlights, officers shouting, Simons waving frantically. "Carter, move!" Blake's hand clamped around her ankle. "Don't walk away from me!" He yanked hard. Linda crashed to the ground, pain flaring through her knees. Blake dragged her backwards, water splashing around them. She twisted, kicked him square in the face, then crawled toward the exit again. He roared and lunged, but Linda snatched the fallen pipe from the water and swung it with every ounce of strength she had left. The metal connected. Blake's body went limp, collapsing into the rising water. Linda didn't stop to check if he was unconscious or dead. She ran. The water surged faster now, like a river chasing her. Officers broke through the wall, grabbing her arms, pulling her and the pipe wrench from the collapsing building. Simons was there, kids in his arms, shouting her name. Linda stumbled into the daylight, coughing, hair soaked, lungs aching. Behind them, the reservoir groaned one final time, and the entire structure caved inward with a roar that shook the hillside. A tidal wave of muddy water burst outward, and Blake, he vanished beneath it. The officers rushed Linda and the kids to safety. The air buzzed with radios, sirens, shouting. Simons grabbed Linda's arm. "Carter, did he make it out?" Linda stared at the smoking ruin of the reservoir. The water still churned violently. "I don't know," she whispered. But deep down, she feared the truth. The hunt wasn't over. Not yet.
The sun was dipping behind the pines by the time the last ambulance pulled away, leaving the once crowded hillside eerily quiet. Smoke from the collapsed reservoir drifted into the sky like a fading ghost, and the muddy water that had burst through its walls trickled in weak streams down the slope. Officer Elena Carter sat on the back of a rescue vehicle, her clothes soaked and stiff, her breathing still uneven. A medic wrapped a blanket around her shoulders for the third time, murmuring words she barely heard. "You're in shock, ma'am. Just keep breathing. You're lucky to be alive." Lucky? Linda wasn't sure the word fit. Children alive. Officers alive. Structure collapsed. Threat unresolved. Her brain filtered everything into boxes, the way trained officers learn to survive chaos. But no matter how she sliced the facts, one thing stayed stubbornly unresolved. Blake. He hadn't been found. Not a body, not a sign, not even a bubble rising from the mess of mud and broken concrete. Simons jogged over, mud splattered on his vest, carrying 2 cups of something steaming. He pressed one into Linda's hands. "Coffee. Don't thank me yet. It tastes like engine oil." Linda tried to smile. It slipped off her face before it formed. "You okay?" Simons asked. She stared at the ground. "He grabbed my ankle. He was still conscious when the wall blew." Simons sat beside her, lowering his voice. "Carter, even guys like him don't survive that level of collapse." Linda turned her head slowly, meeting his eyes. "You don't know Blake." Simons inhaled sharply, understanding the weight of that sentence. Blake wasn't just any criminal. He was trained, intelligent, obsessed, and he'd had years learning from the same woman now trying to wrap her hands around a coffee cup that wouldn't stop trembling.
He said he was my mother, Linda whispered. Simons frowned. He's delusional. No, he's hurt, angry, lost, but he's not delusional. You're defending him? I'm explaining him. Simons exhaled hard. Well, unless you want him climbing out of a sewer grate somewhere, I say we... A radio crackled. Unit 7 to command. We've got movement downstream. Every officer's head snapped up. Simons froze. Linda. She was already on her feet. The two officers sprinted toward the creek bordering the reservoir. Flashlights bobbed along the muddy bank as rescue crews fanned out, scanning the shadows. Movement where? Linda shouted. The response came from up ahead. By the drainage pipe. Something's caught. Linda's chest tightened. She pushed past the cluster of paramedics, slipping on wet gravel before skidding to a halt near the large storm pipe jutting from the hillside. Something bobbed in the rushing water. A form, limp, face down. One of the medics waded in and grabbed the body by the collar, dragging it to shore. Muddy water poured off the soaked jacket as they rolled the figure over. Simons raised his weapon instinctively. Linda didn't move. Her breath caught. It wasn't Blake. It was an officer from the missing patrol team, one from Blake's original ambush earlier that morning. The man was alive, barely, coughing blood and mud, eyes swollen shut. "Get him to medics," Linda shouted. Rescuers rushed forward, lifting the battered man onto a stretcher. As they carried him away, his cracked voice rasped out, He left through the west tunnel." Linda stiffened. Simons cursed under his breath. Of course he did, the only tunnel we didn't know existed. "He knew this place better than we did," Linda murmured. She turned toward the ruined reservoir, her mind racing through the blueprints she'd seen, the routes she'd memorized, the training drills she'd once run with Blake. All the cracks, all the vulnerabilities. There was one path Blake would take. Linda didn't hesitate. She grabbed a fresh flashlight from a rescue bag, clicked it on, and started down the brushy incline toward the old maintenance road. Simons ran after her. Hey, Carter, where the hell do you think you're going?" "To end this. You're not going alone." Before she could argue, another voice came from behind them. "Lieutenant Carter." They turned. Chief Ramos strode toward them, mud streaking his uniform, his normally calm expression carved with tension. "You two aren't going anywhere, not until we regroup. We need backup, dogs, a perimeter, hell, half the county." "No time. If Blake reaches the highway, he disappears, and he'll take another kid next week or next month. He escalates. He always escalates." Ramos stepped closer. "You trained that boy. You know how he thinks, so think like him." Linda's eyes sharpened. "I already am." Ramos paused, then nodded once. "Take a radio, and Simons goes with you." Simons grinned grimly. "Knew you couldn't get rid of me." They moved fast, across the muddy embankment, through the withered brush, toward the forgotten stretch of maintenance road that fed the reservoir. The trees thickened, the light fading as dusk settled across the forest. Two officers followed at a distance, staying far enough behind not to spook or distract. Linda moved with purpose. She wasn't guessing. She knew Blake. He valued secrecy. He loved tunnels. He loved control, and he hated feeling powerless. The West Tunnel was the only route that would satisfy all three. As they approached the old concrete drainage culvert, Simons whispered, "Tracks, fresh ones." Linda knelt, touching the muddy impressions. Boot tread, size 11, deep heel pressure. He was running, not limping, not crawling, running. "He's ahead of us," Linda murmured. Branches snapped in the distance. Simon swung his flashlight toward the sound. "You hear that?" Linda didn't answer. She was already moving again, faster now, weaving between trees. Her breath fogged in the cooling air. Her legs screamed from exhaustion, but adrenaline pushed her farther. 100 yards ahead, the trees thinned into a clearing near the old Ranger service road. And in the middle of that clearing, a figure moved. Tall,
mud-soaked, dripping, breathing hard. Blake. Simons lifted his gun. "Freeze! Hands where I can see them!" The figure didn't raise his hands. He didn't run. He just turned slowly and smiled. "Mother," he said quietly, "you came." Simon stepped closer. "On your knees, now." But Blake didn't look at Simons. His eyes stayed locked on Linda. "You always said not to run from consequences, so I didn't." Linda's grip on her gun tightened. "Blake, it's over." He nodded once, as if he had already accepted this. Then he reached into his jacket slowly. Simons tensed. "Don't!" Blake pulled out. Not a gun, not a knife. A photograph. Wet, wrinkled, edges torn. Linda blinked. It was a picture of him as a child. 8 years old, standing in front of the group home. Dirty clothes, hollow eyes, lonely. "I kept it," Blake whispered, "because you were the first person who looked at me like I was worth saving." "You were worth saving." He shook his head. "I crossed too many lines." Water dripped from his hair as he looked down at the photo one last time. Simons lowered his gun slightly, softened by the sight. "Blake," Linda said softly, "let me bring you in alive." The man's eyes glistened. "You already saved the kids. That's what matters." He took one step back. "Blake, no!" But it was too late. His heel slipped intentionally over the edge of the ravine behind him, and before either officer could reach him, he let himself fall. Linda lunged to the edge, flashlight darting wildly across the rocks below, but the shadows were too deep. His body couldn't be seen. Simons grabbed her arm. "Carter, stop! The slope isn't stable." Tears burned behind Linda's eyes. She wasn't sure if they were for relief or grief. Chief Ramos arrived moments later, breathless, shouting orders.
Rescue crews fanned out, shining lights down into the ravine. Hours later, after the search was suspended due to darkness, Ramos put a hand on Linda's shoulder. "We'll resume at dawn," he said. "He may still be alive." Linda stood stiffly, staring at the ravine. "He's gone," she whispered. But deep down, she didn't know if she believed that. Simons wrapped an arm around her, guiding her away from the edge. "You did everything you could." Linda nodded, slowly, painfully. But as she turned away, flashlight trembling in her hand, the wind carried a single sound from the ravine below. A faint rustle, a shifting rock, a breath, or maybe just her imagination. Either way, the reckoning wasn't over. Not yet. Not as long as Blake's shadow lingered in the dark.